Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Are you ready to have some fun? Yeah? Okay, I need these energies, so keep them. Okay, so let's start. So a little introduction. My name is Tomer Bar. I'm the VP of Security Research at SafeBreach. SafeBreach presented 8 talks at Black Hat USA in the last 5 years, 10 in total, and 9 DEF CON talks. I have 20 years experience, mostly in APT research and vulnerability research and other stuff as well, OT and other stuff. And I presented in many conferences all around the world, and I was qualified to speak 3 talks at the upcoming Black Hat and DEF CON. So today we are going to speak a little bit about the backgrounds of my research, what was the motivation, what were the assumptions, and then I will showcase you a real use cases that I found in the wild about nation state and large-scale cybercrime. And we'll end our talk with the most and best OopsSec campaign that I ever saw, but found the weakest link as well there. So, as you know, every research starts with assumptions, right? So let's describe them. I think the first one is the most important one because people think about like hackers, like in Hollywood, you know, they are so smart, they never do any mistakes, they just like guess the password in the 3rd attempt, right? But in real life, it's not like that. So in real life, my assumption was that attackers are still human and they will do mistakes. And it's not like if you are advanced APT and like script kiddies, it's not interesting, right? But advanced APTs does not mean that they know how to like secure their infrastructure, right? The second assumption is that some threat actors are lazy and they will feel comfortable even if somebody will like detect them and publish a research blog post about them, and they will still do the same thing and continue with changes or without any change, and I will speak about it later. And the third one is pretty important as well. Most of the times when we have a breach, we do the IR, the investigation, on our backyards, but I will try to show you that it's also important to try to understand the attacker's backyards, only doing legal action, and I will show it later. Okay, so I developed this OopsSec meter where you can get 100 bad points. So there are 10 categories. Each category can give you 10 bad points. For example, if I, as a researcher, can build victim heat maps, where are the victims located, and the full identity of any victim, you'll get 10 points. If it's partial, like 5, and so on. So you can, if I can take down the entire operation, you'll get 10 points. So we can give, like, compare the different threat actors' operation security mistakes levels. Okay, so let's start with the technical stuff. That's why we are here. So our first threat actor is located in Gaza Strip. It has been active since 2012, so like more than a decade, attacking both Windows, but focusing more on Android targets. Okay, so this is like a VirusTotal example, and they're using a domain for C2 called pal2me.net. So in 2017, it was first discovered. The threat actor has self-developed a web panel. Actually, it's not a good idea to develop your own, but they did. And it was actually pretty good. It used two-factor authentication login, MFA. And the problem was that navigating directly to the inner pages resulted in full access to the system with no authentication required. So on the right, you can see it's blurred on purpose. The Google Translate of their website. It's called Records Management System, and you can see all of the victims' data. This is the keylogger data, the keystrokes themselves. So 2017, it's not so important. So quantum clip to nowadays, and the threat actor is still active. It's masquerading as a Google Play app. And the malware was also uploaded from Gaza, was signed in Gaza, so it's probably the origin of the attacks. And as you can see, it was uploaded maybe by a victim on the Palestinian Authority or from the attackers to check themselves if they are detected or not by a different vendor on VirusTotal. So they are still alive. And the malware has plenty of collection capabilities. I won't go over it one by one, but if you can see, there is like permission to do anything. You know, it's full surveillance, SMS, call logs, and if my phone was infected, they can, or one of you, they can hear what we are talking right now. They steal the microphone and so on. But the most important stuff for us is the top right box. They are doing the exfiltration to the command and control server from the Android machine via HTTP post request to the data URL. So I just copy paste this from IDA, click it, copy paste it on the browser and clicked, and I got the browser password, sorry, the database password, right? So it's amazing. They just expected a post request. I just sent HTTP GET request and got all this incredible data. And this time they like learned from their mistakes, and they didn't try to develop their own self-made backend system. They used a very common one used by legit all around the world, legit users. This is called Laravel. I hope I pronounce it right. And it was misconfigured, and you can see the stack trace on the left and all of the data exposed. And then I started to think, is it like one-time mistakes? Maybe it was like misconfigured by mistake, but all of the C2 servers are vulnerable. And here are the credentials of the Windows-based victims database. So on 2017, the first stage malware code download the second step malware named ddd.zip, 3 times D, from the C2 server. Now it's called pal4u, not pal2me.net. And the name of the folder was like 5 times the letter Z, as you can see there. So I tried to play with it. Now their C2 server in 2022 was named app.pal4u.net. So they didn't even bother to like replace the domain. They just replaced the subdomain. And now when I surf not to DDD, instead to CCC, which was very hard to like guess, you get a directory listing because the web server is misconfigured, and you get a directory listing of all the files in this directory. And guess what? All of the files are like all of the victim exfiltrated data sorted by date in a zip file, so I can download them. So I did, and I was able to like map 8,000 victims. Most of them are in Gaza, but others in other Middle Eastern countries. And the amount of exfiltrated data was pretty big. It's like about 500 compressed megabyte every day, the average size. Sometimes it's bigger than that, and sometimes it's smaller than that. And my estimation is that there is the total size of the exfiltration data is between 2 to 3 terabytes. So a lot of data. And another OopsSec mistake that they did in like most of their server, and it's very common, we'll see it later on, it's like the OpenDir problem. And you can see like the root directory, and we can see all of the backend code, but we cannot download it, right? Because backend code cannot be downloaded by a browser. If it's a PHP, ASPX, or other backend, you cannot download it by a browser. So I used VirusTotal Graph. It's like a tool where you pay to VirusTotal to Google. You get access to this tool. It's very convenient because you can start with anything, like any IOC, like a URL, file, hash, or anything else, and then pivot from that point to the entire infrastructure. So I did it. This is just a partial view of the infrastructure. And one of the servers is called Tawaji or something like this, pal4u.net. And there is a double mistake here, because not just that they allow to list all of the files via browsing, they also I imagine that they upload the content to the server, to the C2 server. So they compressed it to a zip file, Tawaji zip file, and then upload it, extract it, and forgot to delete the zip file. So the zip file is downloadable by the browser. So now I can download the entire backend, right? So they had mistakes there as well at the backend, but I will skip that part. Let's speak about what happened after I published all of this data. Started a year ago, in June 2022 at Recon. After that at DEF CON, HackCon, Security Fest, Confidence, spoke all about it, and the attackers also, the threat actors also heard about it, and they tried to fix their mistakes. So let's see if they fix it right. So they're still active. They moved from up pal4u to I2C pal4u. So how much does it cost to buy a new domain? Right? So $5? No. Just a subdomain. They moved the server from the Palestinian Authority to the Amsterdam, changed the IP, but as you can see, the server is still operating, and when I did a post request to the types, it returns to me the allowed extensions of exfiltrated data, so I knew that it was working. So as you can see, when I try a different post request to the key, this time URL, including MAC, which is machine ID, and app ID. I just pick one because I didn't know what to choose, and then I got key successfully. So the server is fully working, but what happens if I will omit the MAC and app ID? So when I did that, I generated an error. It's misconfigured, and they show me the entire error, and it was in the keylogger function. So interesting to see that they are still using a keylogger. And even a little bit funnier, when I changed the app ID from integer to string, and they expect an integer, they had an error, and they give me the error. So you can see SQL injection, prone to SQL injection vulnerability, and there I stopped. I didn't do that because it's not legal. But as you can see, I got the backend DB of victim exfiltrated data, the phones table with all of the fields of the phones, the stolen phones. Okay, so what about the CCC? So you cannot win everything, because the CCC, they fixed it. I tried to surf to it via the domain name, directly to the IP. I got 404 or a blank or 404. So started to think to myself, did I really fix it or just block the OpenDIR misconfiguration? So I knew the files because I already downloaded the past ones, right? So I just tried to download the files by date because they have the same template. And as you can see, I can still download them. I did it from Germany as well. So I have all of the files, and guess what? They didn't even bother to change the encryption password. So again, I have full visibility into the entire victim exfiltration. Funny, right? So they got 47 points, I think, if I remember right. Yeah, 47. They were not so bad, but not so good. We'll see even worse example later on, believe me. Okay, so let's speak a little bit about Iranian threat actor, which in late 2021 used zero-day vulnerability, MS-HTML, for infecting Farsi-speaking victims with a tool I named Power Short Shell, because it was very short. It was like 50 lines of PowerShell script, but it was very powerful and collecting a lot of data and exfiltrating it. And this threat actor also used phishing campaigns against Google, against Gmail and Instagram credential as well. So they did the same mistakes. So I won't continue speaking about the same mistake, but they had opened here, they did it in a zip file. I can download them and get all of the backend code. And when you look at the backend code, you can see that it's like vulnerable. I didn't do it, but it's theoretically vulnerable to like remote code execution, because they are allowing any file type to be uploaded. And they are also using vulnerable function, vulnerable to directory traversal, so you can decide the content, where it will be written, and you can serve to it via HTTP. Theoretically, and everyone can run code on their C2 server. Regarding the phishing, so as I said, using Gmail and Instagram phishing, they also did a very sophisticated Apple ID credential stealing for the iCloud access. So iCloud uses two-factor authentication, and they developed the first time that I saw a browser automation in order to get the OTP on time and like type it like a human in the browser, and then when they got into the iCloud, they got access to the entire Apple machine, iPhone machine. This is the backend code. It was also available for download. This is the one that implemented the two-factor authentication, and the logs are written. If you can see on the first line, the path is out.txt. So if you go there, you will see the entire passwords. You can see it here, out.txt, and you get all the victims' passwords just by browsing to out.txt. So it's like viewable. If they just change it to not to be text, I could not do it easily. This is another mistake. Another Iranian threat actor, which is also nation state and was also focusing on phishing. This time it's about Telegram credentials of targets which the Islamic regime sees as a threat. And this time, I don't know why, but the malware exfiltrate the data using FTP. And FTP is like clear text, so when you like reverse engineering the malware, you can get the credentials. But this was not the biggest mistake. The biggest mistake was that the FTP incoming directory was located under the web root of the HTTP server. So theoretically, you can upload any web shell through the FTP and serve to it via HTTP and run your code. So a very big mistake. So Checkpoint published a little bit about that. I did a parallel research and did not publish it, but I will share it with you. So their phishing did the same mistakes, and they wrote the files to a file named names.txt. So you can see each one of the steps. There was like 4 or 5 steps of the credential stealing. First your name, then your password, then your PIN code, and so on, the OTP. And they got all of the data just by browsing, right? And I also found that I can download their code. It was, I think, a .NET. Yeah, it was a .NET. So I decompiled it. It was MSIL. And I obfuscated it, but they are besides of writing the code, the credentials, sorry, to a local file, they also sent it to a Gmail account. So I have the Gmail accounts and the username and passwords of the attackers. Didn't use it because it's not legal, but if I would, I can have access to all of the exfiltrated data via the file and via the Gmail account. Okay, let's speak a little bit about Chinese threat actors. So it will be a short example. Sharp Panda is a very known threat actor, targets in South Asian government, and it uses actually a very old but very efficient exploit. It was like Office exploit, and it's not important, but as you can see on the target line, they are referring the user into their C2 server, and this will be the payload infection. Checkpoints also found that when you upload, that the server is doing the same mistake. It's like OpenDir, and the main.php file writes the file to a textual file with a fixed name, and they publish about it. And it was like on 2021. I checked it out in the beginning of the year and found out that they didn't change anything. So even if it was like a lot of hype around it and a lot of news sites quote it, they didn't change the PHP. The server is still OpenDir, and it writes the files into the same textual file. It's not clear text. It was like RC4 encrypted, but guess what was the password? It was 126, right? So not so hard to decrypt the data, and I did it myself 2 years after the original blog post. So if you remember, our second assumption is that sometimes threat actors are a little bit lazy, right? What will be the cost just to change the textual file name to like fix the misconfiguration of the server? It should be easy, right? But sometimes they don't think about it, they're not aware, and they don't fix it. Okay, so we spoke a little bit about like nation-state threat actors. Let's speak a little bit about cybercrime, and let's see if they are doing the same mistakes or not, or different one. So this threat actor goal was to steal as much credit cards as possible and to make them money. So they used 5-step infection chain, and I will like go and explain each step. So on the left, you can see a partial list of the C2 servers that were live at the time of this check. It was like January 22, and one of them stores the entire code on pay.zip. I don't need to explain it because you already know how did I get it, and I get all of the backend code. And the victims in the first step are found in second-hand online market sites. So when you someone in Iran want to like sell something like their car, I don't know, furniture or something like that, their sofa, they just publish, I would like to sell it, publish it with their phone number. So as you can see on the left, they are using a Python script which uses this site devar.ir, which is the most famous site in Iran for that. And they are using the API to extract all of this posting and extract the phones out of it. So they don't care, it's not a targeted attack. They don't care whose money they are stealing. They just want as much as they can have, right? So the victims are collected, the phones are collected to this method. And guess what? The full victim list is like textual and downloadable. I don't know why, but just by browsing to one of the C2 servers with the users.lst, and you can get all of the numbers. This was a long list. But even more funnier, as you can see on the right, it was a Linux machine, the C2 server. So even the bash history file was like browsable. So I can get all of their command of the threat actors that they are typing on the C2 server. So right, it's crazy, right? Even in my imagination, I didn't thought I will find so much interesting mistakes. So the second step is smishing. It's like phishing, but via SMS because it's phones. So they are sending different lures, like arrest in 72 hours, COVID payments, and even dating sites. You are threatened if you are not going to pay. We are coming to you right away. And if you are in Iran, you are going to pay. And actually, they are smart. They are not requesting a lot of money, like $50 or something like that. So you say, okay, what the heck? I will pay the $50. And the only way to pay is by providing your details here and clicking the green button, and then you will get this APK file. And this is the only way to pay. Okay, so guess what? It's a malware, and it's an SMS stealer. So they're smart. They will have all your SMSs with all of the OTP, right? So they have your password and your credit card and even your SMSs. So when I decompile the malware, after getting it, downloading it, I found that there is a resource, and in the resource there is the IP and the URL to one of the C2 servers. Okay, so I went there, and the PHP page that uploads the victim SMS messages to the C2 server is using hard-coded text file name, and the name is lydiateam.txt. Please remember this name because we are going to use it later on. And we can get access to all of the SMSs via surfing to this URL ends with lydiateam.txt. And there were like some of the victims, they sent them 60 messages until they were infected. I can see all of the messages. I can see also past messages after the infection. And this is actually the fake payment site. So if you can see on the black on the top, there is the IP, the real IP of the C2 server, but they are also adding like an image below that with the green lock, and they say, okay, it's HTTPS, it's like the real payment site in Iran. And so if you don't pay attention, you can fall for it. And they also give you a timer. You have to pay in 10 minutes, and it's counting back. It's a timer. So you are just hurry up and put your credit card details here and your passwords. And this is the backend code where they get the credit card. And it's hard to see, but there is a typo in the new card received. And we're also going to use this later on. So this is, and they're also sending this the credit card details into a Telegram group using an API. Okay, so we will go after it after this slide, and the user credentials are also collected and sent to the attacker telegrams as well. So I didn't know about Telegram. I'm not a Telegram user, but I always like to learn new stuff. So I found out they are using 3 different groups, SMS, data, and card. So you can understand by the name what are the goals of each Telegram group. And the funny thing was that by querying this Telegram group using the get chat and putting the chat ID that I found in the C2 server ID, I got an invite link to join the Telegram group. So you can see that this invite link. So the data Telegram group is misconfigured to display all group members like hackers without even joining the group. So please meet the hackers. And the SMS and data group are not private. As you can see, I used the get chat again. And you can see that everybody is welcome. All members are administrators. So please join. But the problem was I did not add access to the messages themselves. I didn't have the privilege to do that. So I just joined with my real name to both groups. Tomer Bar, didn't want to hide. And they are Iranian hackers. And I was one of them for 3 or 4 months until they kicked me. So I saw all of their actions in real time. And the card group was not private, and all the data was accessible via another Telegram API function. This time it was the get updates function. But then I found the group they named So Good, and it was so good, you know, because it seems like the main group, and as you can see, I can see the members. Pay attention also to the Baba Zoro on the right user. This is his nickname. His real name is probably Patrick, or I don't know. Maybe Patrick is his nickname. And indeed, So Good was so good because this group allows access to all messages without even being required to join. Just know the link, and that's it. And you can see that they are like chatting that one of their C2 server was blocked by Google. You can see the credit cards numbers, the exfiltrated ones. You can see all of the data, like the tools, the malwares, backend code, everything, like accessible, and even voice messages between the hackers in Farsi language. I don't speak the language, so if someone do, please help. But I do have access to that. And a deeper analysis, like virus total graph, revealed like massive activity. So hundreds of malware samples, thousands of C2 servers. So it was like make me like curious, how did like bunch of hackers can like do this massive activity, right? Like it's a large cybercrime activities. So I just dig deeper. And actually, those Telegram groups that I show you are just the tip of the iceberg. And I tried to Google it. So I started with Lydia team. If you remember lydiateam.txt, the exfiltration of the SMSs. So actually, there is a Telegram group called Lydia team. I found it under another group called Professor Phishing Telegram group with 50,000 members. So it's like a lot of people, right? And when I search for new card received with the typo, look at that. I got like the C2 server, the phishing server is indexed. So I can get the credit cards by a Google search, right? So yeah, it's crazy. And if you remember Baba Zoro, it's one of the hackers. So it seems like he's like the owner of another group called Zalem Phishing, and he have almost 30,000 people in this group. So he's probably one of like the head of the pyramid. It's one of the leaders of this campaign. And I just searched other group as well, and I found like more than 20 Telegram groups of hackers in Iran. So it started from like few members until 80,000 people. But the most interesting groups were the intimate one, when they actually was the hackers themselves. And those groups were usually used for like sharing data, sharing tools, selling credit cards, and making money. So a lot of people are participating in this scam in Iran. I was able to join all of them except one with my real name. And there was a group called Must Leak, which requires a manual authorization of the administrator. So I just sent him a request, and he approved me. So I have 100% in like getting into their Telegram groups. And going back to decompiling the malware, you can see that there is a lydiatext.class, one of the classes here. So we have like the source code of it. And it sounds interesting. And another mistake that I found is that usually threat actors usually randomize the exfiltrated data to a file with a random extension like the date, time, and other randoms. So you won't be able, like a researcher, to like get it and download it. So when I decompiled the malware, I found some randomization. It was not a good randomization because it's just like 5 digits. And it was done on the malware side. So I figured out that maybe if they are doing it on the client side, the infected machine, they are not randomize it on the C2 server. So I just wrote a script to like browsing to all of these options. It was like very fast. And then I get the entire SMSs, I will skip that, of the entire group. So let's speak a little bit about attribution. They did another mistake, and they infect one of their machines in order to do some checking or testing of their malware, right? So I got the SMSs of the attackers as well. So one of the messages was like from the hosting provider saying like, you got a new C2 server, please try it on, or something like that. You can use it. And I checked it and verified that it's a C2 server. So for sure, the ones that got it is one of the hackers. And his name is Amir Ranjabar. And as you can see, we also have his account number in the National Bank of Iran, 2 telephone numbers, and his full name is Amir Muhammad Ranjabar. And I also found a third-party site that he offers his service as a hacker using the same phone number. So we have a cross, and it's a real man, a real hacker, right? So you can contact him. You can give him a visit because you have his address as well. So back to the question, how come that they got to be so big? So it appeared that Lydia team is like selling and promoting their phishing as a service, phishing campaign with 3 possible plans, like from the basic plan to a full phishing as a service plan. And they offer dozens of phishing lures, like Instagram and so on, and they just duplicate all of those sites, change the code, and they have a phishing site. And they used a pyramid structure. The bot is given for free, everything, the entire C2 server code, anything, if you just give them 20% of the stolen credit cards. So 1 out of 5 credit cards are going to them. Okay, so this is how they got so big, because they just develop it and just sell it or give it for free. So let's see on 2023, after I showcased it in different conferences, they no longer use the same Telegram groups, but I can still get the source code, including the malware and the C2 server, in just 3 clicks from Google, right? So I will show you. Just search and do it later if you want. Lydia Team Telegram, get the first result, get into it. There is like, you click a button, you get the links, you have an invite link. You go to the Telegram group, you get another invite link, and when you click it, you get inside this group, which you have all of the members, see all the files. I download everything like in 1 click, and you get Lydia tools, zip, remote, PHP, which is the backend, and so on. You can see a lot of files, all of the first step scripts to extract the phone numbers and so on. And also movie clips educating how to attack people. So they didn't learn from their mistakes. Okay, so let's go back to the final campaign, which is actually the best operation security campaign I ever saw. I also consulted with other researchers that have a lot of experience, and they agree that it's one of the best. And actually, it's the most persistent Iranian nation-state APT ever discovered. Their first campaign started at 2007. So think about it. It's more than 15 years of constantly attacking people. And I'm after their tails since 2015, I think. So a lot of time I'm spending like monitoring them even today. So their victims are actually individual and organizations, which seen as a threat to the Islamic regime. There were hundreds of victims in 35 countries, and actually 30% and even more of the victims were located in Iran. Infi was discovered by myself, and then they used hard-coded URLs, different ones, like exfiltrate the data from the Windows machines, and also get commands and exfiltrate the data output of the commands to the C2 servers. But they were used hard-coded URLs. So I used a syncall operation, and syncall is like when your computer, when you surfing, do a DNS request, you can get the resolved IP, right? Because we don't remember as a user the IP of CNN.com and whatever. We remember the domain name, right? So if you can change the resolved IP of the C2 server to your IP, you will get all the traffic of all the victims, right? So this is what I did, and actually those threat actors, they also infect their own computers. So I got this image from a pickup, network traffic capture that I captured after I did the syncall. And as you can see, all of the victims are trying to speak with a server in Israel. Actually, it was in my home, instead of the C2 server in Europe. So I had access to all of the data. And the Iranians are very smart. They the lesson was learned. And after the 2015 takedown, think about it, they lost like 8 years of very targeted targets, right? It was very targeted attack, and they spent a lot of efforts in like achieving access to them, and in one day they lost everything. So they analyzed their failures, and they came back in 2017 with a very secure operation security infrastructure. They used a two-step infection chain, which the first tool was called in French. It was named Faudur or Fauder. I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's lightning in English. And the purpose of the first stage malware was just to see that everything is safe, that they got into the correct victim, that this victim is using the computer, so they have interesting stuff they want to like monitor and to exfiltrate. And only after they verify that they are in the right place, there are no threats, the antivirus that was installed was not detecting, and it's not a threat to their second tool, only then they infect the computer with the second tool. They call it tonnerre, which is thunder in French. So think about it, the thunder always comes after the lightning, so there is a story behind it. And as you can see, even on 2018, a year after my publication, it was fully undetectable on VirusTotal. So it was a very good malware, it still is, and it's like full surveillance, a lot of capabilities, and the names are like embedded in the malware themselves with internal version number. Okay, so let's speak about the anti-takedown capabilities, because that's the things that it was most interesting. So the first one actually is very common. Maybe you're already familiar with it. It's called DGA. And DGA is like domain generation algorithm. So instead of like using embedded and hard-coded URLs, they like generate 101 domains every week, okay? And they use different TLDs. This is like the algorithm. When I reverse engineered their code, I found out that they are using CRC32 with like a prefix and then the year, months, and week number. So it's based on the time. Each week they will get a different domain name. But think about mistakes that can happen if the computer is not like configured in the correct time. They will get the wrong domain, so the malware won't be able to connect to the C2 server. So if they don't succeed in connecting to the C2 server, they will go to Sky News or BBC, and they will download the RSS file feed, and they will extract the real date and time from it and use it as the time of the computer and then connect to the C2 domains. So they used space.net, .top, .dnew in that version to have a domain name. But the second anti-takedown capability is much more interesting and unique. So the threat actor implement a C2 signature verification algorithm, RSA1. So first, the malware downloads a signature file. The signature file is a file which was encrypted prior to that on the computers in Iran using a private key, RSA private key. When the malware downloads the signature file, it decrypts it using the embedded public key, which I have because it's embedded in the malware, but only if it can decrypt it using the public key, it means that it was encrypted using the private key, and it means that the C2 server is a verified C2 server. That's how they call it, or approved C2 server. And if I don't have this signature, I cannot like masquerade as another C2. Because the first things that I did is I know, if you remember, I know the domain names. I can forecast what will be the domain next week, in a month, in a year. So I just purchased those domains in advance. And when I did it, before the hackers, all of the victims, malwares, started to connect to my C2 server. It's not a C2 server, it's mine, just the domain. And I didn't have the signature file. So I just put another file, call it a signature file. They download it, and they just stop communicating with me because they understood that it's not a legit C2 server, right? So I only had the IP addresses of the victims, and that's it. So I have a partial heat map, but nothing else. And I started to think what I can do with that. So I purchased in advance all of the C2 server domain names, for like 2 months. It cost me money, but I could like interrupt their action, but not for a long time because it's like expensive. So I started to think about how to break this mechanism, and it was actually very good because it's like encryption, you know, and it was hard to break. And they did it through all of their operation. So they are using dual exfiltration, HTTP and FTP C2 servers, and you can download, the malware downloads the FTP IP, the server IP, using also a signed file with the RSA signature, and the obfuscation is very simple, just decreased 1. So 296 become 185, right? So it's easy, but you cannot break it because it's signed by RSA and you cannot break it. So the implication of this strong operation security is that myself and other researchers cannot do anything to harm and interrupt their attacks. We monitor them, like found different tools, different versions from 1 to 26, but we could not interrupt with their activities. And we didn't know what are the victims, the identity of the victims, what was exfiltrated, and so on. So for 5 years, like a blackout period. But on 2022, I found the weakest link, and this time it was focused on the transmission of the files. The victims exfiltrate the files to a C2 server in Europe, and then the attackers need the data, so they need to download and transfer the data from Europe to Iran, to their machines, right? So I found out that the C2 server, which is a VPS, so it's a dedicated server, they used, it's hard to see, but they use file names like A246C5.xyz. So it seems like a DGA domain name, not a human readable name, right? But alongside hundreds of DGA names, I found 2 others, log1host and f1host. So I started to think, what are those domains, right? Because they are not generated by the DGA. So in order to verify it, I only had Tonnerre version 11, and I knew that there is other newer versions. So I was able to download and guess the name of the Tonnerre, which is the second step, download by the first step folder, by just like browsing to T00015, which is the version, and dash 6.temp and a dash. And when I reverse engineering, I found out that this malware does not connect to log1f and f1 host. So what are those domains? So I found out that the attackers built a self-developed PHP backend page that allowed them to do two things: to list the files on the directory and to delete files on the directory, on this specific directory. So I just wrote a script to list all the files in this directory, and then download each one of them. So for like 6 months, I download everything, but they are smart. All of the data is encrypted in asynchronous encryption. So if you don't have the private key, you cannot get access to the data itself. So I still have only the IPs and like encrypted files. But in a closer look into the files, they embedded metadata obfuscated above the encryption. So I was able to deobfuscate this data. And as you can see on the right, it's like a print screen, screen capture that they take every 5 minutes from each victim. So this is the file name. And I was also able to get the username, the victim username, the machine GUID, which is a very good IOC, the host name, the path to store the file in the C2 server, the Tonnerre version, which is 16. And I only have 15 right now in my hand, and the file name. So one of the victims was a Windows server in Sweden, and they also infect their own computer. So this is the attacker's computer. They used a file name called Maljoun Sarbazi or something like this. Is one of the oppositional leader to Iran regime. Is like seeking to have like a free region in Pakistan, I think, or something like this that belongs to Iran. So they are using his own identity in order to infect other people that follow him. So it was interesting, and they also attacked like human rights activists, and I got all of their file names on all of the data from those machines. So to conclude, attackers are humans, right? Sometimes they are lazy and they won't like fix their mistakes, and we can learn so much just by doing legal stuff, just by browsing to their C2 servers and see what's happened. And it's not like a one mistake. I just give you a little portion of the entire research, which is 200 slides and like more than 10 threat actors all around the world, also cybercrime as well. And I also recommend you to go hack yourself because I found the same mistakes in more than 10 million other legit sites of big enterprises. So please check yourself to see, just browse to your browser, just use your browser, surf to your server, see that you don't do the same mistake. And I like used those researchers, past researchers as as a starting point and leads to my research. So thank you.
All right, thank you very much. So really interesting talk. Are there any questions? Okay, so I will start off with a question. So for the last one, you showed us that you tried to create a sinkhole to actually mess with them. My question is for the first ones you described with the credit card stealing. Did you take any steps to cancel the operations, or did you just monitor what they did?
Okay, so of course I reported it to anyone that was listening. I reported to the Interpol and other security agency. Also spoke personally with the CISO of one of the USA agencies, and I didn't get any response. I don't know if they did anything with that. So I encourage you, if you have like connection to those places, please talk to me, and I will be happy to give all of the data and share everything I found.
Okay, yeah, kind of depressing. Thank you. Any more questions from the audience? All right, so let's thank the speaker again, and yeah.